lobby. If you haven't registered, then please do so in the lobby. Again, the 10 o'clock salah now is completely full. There's still room in the 8 o'clock salah. So we ask you again, if you're interested in that, to please register and pick up your parking tags in the lobby. Inshallah, tomorrow is the day of Arafah, the very, very special day, of course, on the Islamic calendar. And inshallah, tomorrow we know that many people in the community will be fasting because of the virtue and the fada'il that's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So because of the fact that many people will be fasting, Fajr Salah for tomorrow only will be at 4:30 instead of 5 o'clock. So we pray at 5 o'clock typically, but tomorrow only it will be at 4:30 inshallah in the masjid to make it more convenient for the people. And tomorrow evening inshallah we will also have a special program in place of our Monday program. So there will be no Monday program this week. Instead, we will have a program tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. About the day of Arafah, the ultimate day of mercy. Inshallah, we'll speak about the importance of the day of Arafah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the end, we will leave some time for dua, for people to make their personal du'as and adhkar before Maghrib Salah. And then iftar and dinner will both be served here in the masjid for the community. So we ask everyone to please come, partake in the program, and also join for iftar and for dinner, inshallah, and benefit from that. And the final announcement, we ask you to please mark your calendars for Friday, June 28th, inshallah. So there will be no Monday program that week. In place of that week, we will have a special program on Friday, June 28th, in partnership with Ihsan Coaching, which is a coaching service, a marital, premarital counseling and coaching service. We'll have a guest speaker, Brother Farhan Ahmad, who's been here multiple times before. He will be giving the khutbah, inshallah, that day on a very important topic related to marriages in Islam. And then in the evening, we'll have a special program, inshallah, entitled Love Matters, Keeping Marriages Alive. So Farhan Ahmad, Mufti Umar Khan of Darul Quran Foundation, and myself, inshallah, we will be presenting this particular subject on the evening of June 28th, Friday. That will be in the Tafsir Hall. So we ask everyone to please mark your calendars for that and to join us for that program as well. Inshallah, the khatib for both the Jum'ahs today will be Shaykh Atif Gohar, and the second salah will be led by Hafiz Baha Alak, inshallah. And at West Pine Masjid this week, Brother Walid Ashkar is the khatib. Inshallah, at 1:30 we will have the adhan for the Jum'ah, inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أحق من ذكر وأحق من عبد وأنصر من ابتغي وأرأف من ملك وأجود من سئل وأوسع من أعطى. كل شيء هالك إلا وجهك، لن تطاع إلا بإذنك ولن تعصى إلا بعلمك، تطاع فتشكر وتعصى فتغفر. اللهم أنت أقرب شهيد وأدنى حفيظ. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد: وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون. أما بعد. Usually what we find is that when Allah talks about groups of people, they're usually categorized into two. You have the disbelievers and you have the believers. You have those who decided to stay back and not fight in jihad and defend the Muslim lands, and you have those that decided to go out in jihad and defend the Muslim lands. You have those that fall for the deception of the dunya, and then you have another camp, those that are able to see past the deception of the dunya. At one point in the Quran, Allah mentions there's three groups. And He mentions this in Surah Waqi'ah, وَكُنْتُمْ أَزْوَاجًا ثَلَاثًا, that on a day of judgment you will be split into three. Ashabul Maymana, there will be those who will be on the right side. And these are people who will be on the haqq, people who did good deeds, they will be here on this camp on the right side. Ashabul Maymana, and then you have those, Ashabul Mash'amah, and then you have those who will be on the left side. People who were not very obedient to Allah, and people who need to answer for the crimes they committed, and they will be in this camp on the left side. And then you have a special class, an elite class. وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ. Allah refers to them as as-sabiqun, the earlier ones. And this is an elite class, a special class. It doesn't belong to either camp. They're distinguished on their own. And as-sabiqun, the earlier ones, are those people who as soon as they hear something, a good action, they're the first ones to do it. They are the trendsetters. They don't wait until something is popular before deciding to go and start it. They start it first. They go into that action first, and then others follow them along. These are the first people. When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Allah asked, who will give their wealth for the path of Allah? They're the first ones to raise their hands. And when they say, who will go and fight out in jihad and defend the Muslim lands? They're the first ones to raise their hands and go forward. Anytime it comes to an action to start it, the sabiqun are the first people. The first ones to start in action, not wait until it becomes popular and then go into it. Rather, they are the trendsetters themselves. And Allah decides He makes this distinction very clear. Even before the Day of Judgment, the distinction of sabiqun has come. Although all of these Sahaba are special in the sight of Allah, and all of these Sahaba have a special rank in the sight of Allah, there are those who have more rank than others. There are those who have more merit than others. And before the Day of Judgment, Allah has already established this principle of sabiqun. He says in a part of Quran, لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل. That of the Sahaba, they're not all equal. The ones who spent their wealth in the path of Allah and fought in the path of Allah before the conquest of Mecca, before the Muslims retook Mecca, they are not the same. أُولَٰئِكَ أَعْظَمُ دَرَجَةً. These Sahaba, they have a higher rank than the ones who spend their wealth and the ones who fight in the path of Allah after the conquest of Mecca. Although Allah says, وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى. For both camps, for both groups, Allah has promised good for both. But again, the ones who fought before the conquest of Mecca are not the same who fought afterwards. They have a special rank. Because before the conquest of Mecca, the Muslims didn't know if they're going to be on the winning side or on the losing side. They didn't know if they're going to be amongst the victors, amongst the losers. Although after the conquest of Mecca, whoever fights, they know that they're already on the winning side. Islam is now taking over. It's now flourishing. And so both of them cannot be on the same level. And so this distinction of sabiqun, of the very first people, the ones who accepted and the ones who accepted good and the ones who did good first, they will always have a special rank. And even this description that Allah gives in the Quran of sabiqun is very unique. The way Allah describes sabiqun. He says, وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ. He says the early people are the early people. Usually how you would describe something is that you have a subject and a predicate, and usually the predicate describes the subject as you would say that the student is a very hardworking student. So you understand, okay, that student, okay, I have some information about him. He's hardworking. Or a person you'd say, okay, that player over there, he's a very fast player. Again, subject, predicate, you get some description. That, okay, that player, he's a very fast player, he has that quality. But the way Allah describes it in the Quran, He merely repeats it twice. He says that the early people are the early people. And there's not much information really given. There's not really much description given over there. But this was intentionally done. And there are different ways of looking at this ayah. One of them is to show that the best part of the sabiqun, the best part of the early ones, are they themselves. You don't need to have an extra description that makes them worthy of something. Like when you said that that student is hardworking. The praiseworthy quality in him is that he is hardworking. If you were to take that praiseworthy quality, that hardworking quality out of there, he would be a normal student like anybody else. And so Allah is not saying that they have an extra quality and He's detracting from other qualities. Rather, He's saying they themselves, without anything else, just they themselves, as-sabiqun. They are the early ones. They themselves deserve the full entire praise. Another way of looking at it is how we would say that book, now that was a real book. We would say that match, now that was a real match. We merely stated the same thing twice. That book, it was a real book. Again, you're merely stating the same thing twice. But in of itself, there's praise there. And we understand that praise. And that's the way Allah, that's the meaning Allah is giving off here as well. The sabiqun, the early ones, they're the early ones. They themselves deserve all the praise for it. And let's analyze why Allah created this special class and why Allah created this elite class on Day of Judgment and gave them their own position, gave them their own group. And this is because usually when you are the first to start something, they endure the most troubles. The ones who start something first are the ones that endure the most troubles. So I'll give an example. For our parents, and I mean by parents, I mean the ones that are above our generation or my generation, they came here with absolutely nothing. And so they had the most troubles. They came here with no money. They came here with no job. They came here with no place to live. And they had to start from the bottom. Slowly by slowly through the years, they built and they built and they built. And now they have something after decades. But they endured the most troubles versus people in my generation, we already had something to work with. We didn't have a language barrier we had to overcome. We grew up with this language. We were already going to the schools from a young age. Our jobs are already guaranteed because we're already going through the whole entire schooling system, applications, everything. And so the very first ones who usually start something are the ones that go through the most troubles. And the same happens with the very first Muslims. When Islam was not very popular, and the Muslims, when the people were converting in Mecca to Islam, they endured the most troubles. They were the ones that were whipped the most. They were the ones who were taken to the sand and thrown naked onto the sand and have their bodies burnt. They were the ones who were boycotted. All this happened to the early Muslims. Whereas later on in Medina, if anybody were to accept Islam, then they would be welcomed into a Muslim land. If they didn't have anything, then the other Sahaba would help this person to start up. And so the very first ones are always the one to endure the most troubles. And this same rule apply to us in our lives. If we are the first in our friend circle, or if we are the first in our families to maybe start getting more religious or start a new action, then we also will face the same type of behavior from others. That they will be like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you starting this? This is so new for you. A person in his friend circle, he might be the first one to start going to the masjid. His other friends are going to start looking at him with funky looks. They're going to start giving him funny comments. And they're going to be like, why are you trying to go to the masjid after all these years? We've been together for like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. You've never thought of going to the masjid. Now, all of a sudden, you're thinking about going to the masjid now. Because he's the first one in the friend circle to start becoming religious. He's the first one in the friend circle to start doing a good action. And so he's going to face the most trouble because of it. Also, in today's world of social media and online reviews, what usually happens is that we're molded to become followers. We're not used to being sabiqun. We're not used to coming up with original thought and being pioneers in something. We're used to following. Because before you buy anything, before you make any type of purchase, before you buy a car, before you buy a laptop, before you buy an item off Amazon, the first thing that we all do is that we go online and we look at reviews and we see what other people said about it. And we see that, okay, enough people said that it was good. Enough people had enough good experiences with this item that then you want to buy it. And so you're not exactly buying that item because you thought about it first. You're buying it because everybody else bought it. Everybody else had a good time with it. And now you're just following them. And so we have been kind of molded from a young age to be followers and not really be sabiqun, not really be from amongst those who are pioneering, who are starting original thought, who are the ones going forward and being first in starting an action. We're used to being the ones who follow. Or before we go on any vacation spot, what do? We look up online reviews and we say, okay, enough people had a good time here, I think I should go there as well. Again, you're just following the trend, what everybody else has been doing. And so from a young age, we're kind of being molded into being this. But the Sabiqun, they're the ones who are very brave, without any online reviews, without it being a very popular place, without it being a very popular action. They're the ones that are starting it. And they're the ones that are going to leave reviews for everybody else. The Ashabul Maymanah that Allah describes in the surah. He says, Ashabul Maymanah, the people of the right, they did good. How did they become Ashabul Maymanah? Well, the reason they became Ashabul Maymanah is because they followed the Sabiqun. The Sabiqun laid the foundation for them. The earlier ones, the ones who were the first to do good, they laid the foundation, and then you have the Ashabul Maymanah. Then you have the people on the right. They followed them. And that's how they became in that camp. Also, the earlier ones, the Sabiqun, they're usually the ones to break customs and go against norms first. And this is what all the prophets did. All of the prophets did was Sabiqun. And they broke the customs and norms of their people. And their people never understood it. And they always questioned them. And they said that your forefathers, they never did this. They never said what you're saying. Nobody in town is saying what you're saying. Your own family that you grew up with, your household, nobody in there is saying what you're saying. Where are you getting these things from? Where are you getting the idea that we have to worship one God? Where are you getting the idea that we have to give up everything for the sake of Allah? Where are you getting all this if nobody else has been doing this? And so all of the prophets, they all went through this with their nation. They were the Sabiqun. They were going against the customs, the norms. They faced retaliation because of it. But again, eventually they had followers. They had the Ashabul Maymanah with them. They will have followers. And eventually you will set an example for everybody else to follow. And this idea of being the Sabiqun is both in good and in bad. It can be both in good and bad. You can be a sabiq of good. You can be a sabiq of evil. And I'll give an example. That Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was a special sahabi to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he has extra reward, and we all know the status of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But he fasted, and all the other sahaba fasted. And he prayed nawafil, but all the other sahaba also prayed nawafil. So what made him more special than everybody else if he did the same actions as everybody else? It was the fact that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was a sabiq. He was the first to accept something good, and then he would encourage others to do it. And he was amongst the very first to accept Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ even said that when he presented Islam to others, there was a type of hesitancy, they had to think about it. But when it came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he accepted Islam right away. He knew something to be good, he took it, he followed it, he practiced it right away. He was a sabiq of his people. And on the flip side, for somebody to be the first, a sabiq, to be the first in something bad, is the example of Abu Lahab. That why was he condemned in the Quran when he ridiculed the Prophet, but many other people also ridiculed the Prophet? When he denied Islam, but many of the other people also denied Islam. He was an enemy of Islam, but there were many other enemies of Islam as well. So why is Abu Lahab so special that he gets that place in the Quran? Because again, he was a sabiq. He was the first in evil. When the Prophet ﷺ first was giving da'wah to his people, this was the first time he was introducing Islam. Abu Lahab was the first one to speak up and the first one to deny the Prophet. And he was the one that started the trend of denying the Prophet. If he did not speak up right then and there, then others would have thought about Islam. But he was the door, and he shut that door closed for everybody else to come and accept Islam. And so because of that one reason, he was condemned in the Quran, and he has a special punishment for him saved. The question then comes down to one very simple question. We understand that these Sabiqun, they are a special elite class. They will have their own camp, their own group on the Day of Judgment. We understand why they are so special. The question then comes, how do we become from amongst the Sabiqun? Is it still possible to come from amongst the Sabiqun? And there are a couple of points I'd like to mention how we can become from amongst the Sabiqun in our own times. One is to take advantage of your youth. Take advantage of your youth. We know that on the Day of Judgment, there will be 7 groups of people who will be under the shade of the Arsh of Allah. Amongst those 7 people is شَابٌ نَشَأَ فِي عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ, a young person man or woman, a young person who grew up in the ibadah and grew up in the worship of Allah. How is this so special? He grew up in the worship of Allah. He was a sabiq. He was a person who spent his youth. He did not wait until he gets much older. He has more free time now. His responsibilities are passed down to his children. No, along with all the responsibilities he has, along with all the youth and the energy that he has, he's using that to worship Allah, and he is a pioneer. He is the first. He's not waiting like everybody else. He's starting that trend of worshiping Allah in his youth. Another way that we can be amongst the sabiqun is to start prayers in our workspaces and in our schools, right? Many people, they don't end up praying in their work. They don't end up praying in schools because they don't realize it's something you can do. They never went out there. They never tried. They never talked to their boss. They never talked to their supervisor. They never talked to their principal. So they didn't realize it's something you can do. But if you want to be from amongst the sabiqun, in one very practical way, is to facilitate prayer for yourself and all those around you as well. Talk to the supervisor, talk to the principal, explain to them that there's prayer, and then start prayer in that workplace, start prayer in your school. You will be from amongst the sabiqun. You have pioneered, you have started that action, and everybody else that comes will follow. Even something even more simple than that, is starting jama'ah, starting congregational prayer in our homes. Usually what we see is that in Muslims' homes, the father, he'll pray, the children, they'll pray in their own respective rooms, but they're not praying together. Be the first one in your family to start praying in jama'ah. Be the first one in your family to start gathering everybody in one room and praying together. Even like that, you can become from amongst the sabiqun. A very simple, practical way of doing it. Another way of becoming from amongst the sabiqun is that when we hear a particular month or a particular day has more virtue than other months and other days, then we should be the first ones to start practicing and be the first ones to start doing extra ibadah in that month and in those days. And when everybody else sees that you're doing something extra, they'll inquire, they'll ask, hey, this wasn't part of your usual routine. How come you're reading more Quran now? How come you're praying more now and you weren't doing it, and you're fasting these days but you weren't doing it before? And then you explain to them, these days are extra, these days are special, these days have more rewards than other days. You will be a pioneer, you will be a sabiqun, you will have others following you as well. And this is a perfect time for it because we're in the later days of the Dhul Hijjah days, but we're still within there. And also tomorrow's day of Arafah, the time when we should all be fasting. For the person who fasts, then his sins will be forgiven for the previous year and the year to come. And so we should be the first ones. When we hear these virtuous deeds attached to these months and days, we should be the first ones to take advantage of those months, days. Everybody else will follow. They will see a trend. They will start seeing, okay, I didn't know that this was something you can do. You will become from amongst the sabiqun in this way. And the final point that I'll mention when it comes to becoming from amongst the sabiqun is a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says that من أحيا سنة من سنتي قد أميتت بعدي فإن له من الأجر مثل من عمل بها من غير أن ينقص من أجورهم شيئا. That whoever revives a sunnah of mine that has started to die out, then he will have the reward of doing that sunnah and the reward of everybody else to follow that sunnah as well. We should learn the sunnahs of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Understand which sunnahs are not very popular anymore. Revive those sunnahs. There are certain sunnahs that are starting to die out. Certain sunnahs that are not so popular anymore. One example of that is the miswak. How many of us actually have a miswak with us and use it on a daily basis and come to the masjid with a miswak? This is almost as if it's a dying sunnah, as if it's something that's not very popular anymore. It's something that's kind of losing. We don't really see it in the Muslim ummah, especially in the American Muslim world. We don't really see this anymore. And so if we start reviving certain sunnahs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we see is starting to die out, again, we can become from amongst the sabiqun, have that special class. So we'll reserve that elite class for ourselves in this way. And so we ask Allah that He helps us And He gives us the ability to become from amongst the Sabiqun, and He gives us the ability to at the very least, make it to the Ashabul Maymana. And He protects us so that we do not fall and be from amongst the Ashabul Mash'amah. الحمد لله علي الذات عظيم الصفات سميع السمات كبير الشان جليل القدر رفيع الذكر مطاع الأمر جلي البرهان فخيم الاسم غزير العلم وسيع حلم كثير الغفران. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وقال ربكم ادعوني يستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أرحم أمتي بأمتي أبو بكر وأشدهم في أمر الله عمر وأصدقهم حياء عثمان وقضاهم علي وفاطمة سيدة نساء أهل الجنة والحسن والحسين سيدا شباب أهل الجنة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Please move forward, make space for everybody else in the back. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى. سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى. ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون